Hey guys, today in a tournament game, in a serious high-stakes tournament game, I played one of the craziest chest openings that you could ever imagine. Well, maybe it's not the Bone Cloud opening, but very close to it in quality. But I did it not just for the content, I did it to win, because I knew that this is a good practical chance. I chose the Petzer variation of the Scandinavian defense. Let me show this to you, and let me explain why I chose this objectively bad opening to surprise my opponent. So I'm playing with the black pieces. This is round 5 of the Nauris Cup tournament here in Almaty, Kazakhstan. And after the first 4 rounds, I have 1.5 points. This is a very strong tournament. I played a bunch of masters already. And today I also played in the second round an international master. But in round 1 of today, which is round 5 of the whole tournament, I played a veteran who is rated around 1900 FIDE classical. His name is Heisenberg. No, his name is Karimov Shohan. Yes. So and he's over 50. And I assume that he is not, probably because he's not a very active player, he's not aware of all the trendy, crazy lines that are sometimes played online, such as the Petzer variation of the Scandinavian. So again, as yesterday, if you watched the recap, check it out. If you didn't watch the recap, yesterday I played the normal Scandinavian, so to say. I played the Queen A5 Scandinavian, which is the most most often played one. There is also Queen D6 Scandinavian, so Queen A5, Queen D6, and Queen D8. Those are the 3 normal Scandinavians. Objectively fine for black. But today I played Queen E5 check, which is called the Petzer variation, or the Patzer in different dialects. It's pronounced differently. But it's called this way because only like beginners, noobs play like this. Why give a check just to give a check? Then your queen, after bishop e2, next move will be d4, and white will gain some time on the queen, and your queen will be harassed, which is exactly what happened. Bishop g4, d4, and I have to spend time moving my queen again for the second time, for the third time actually. So first I take the bishop, which is all theory, knight takes, and queen a5. And if you look at this position, and if you look at the computer evaluation, you might say, Greg, why did you play this stupid opening? You are much worse. According to Stockfish, on high depth, it's close to +1. 1 pawn advantage after 6 moves for white. Why? Because white is developed already, almost. The knights have already moved, and white is ready to castle, whereas I have just moved my queen 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and I traded the bishop. So why did I choose to play this opening? Well, let me give you a spoiler alert. After 5 more moves, I will already be better. And you will be also better out of the opening many times if you play this variation online against amateurs or even against professionals. For example, Grandmaster Alexander Shimanov played it against Hikaru Nakamura in World Blitz Championship, and he made a draw in a very comfortable position, equalizing and getting a better position with black out of the opening. In that very same variation, I think Fabiano Caruana in one of the C-Squared podcast episodes was saying something about this line that, oh, this Shimanov guy, he's playing this Petzer variation, Queen e5 Scandinavian, and I didn't know initially what to do against it, Fabi was saying. I think they were playing some online games in it. Now everybody in the top, like the guys who are regularly playing professionally chess, they know of this variation, but amateurs or veterans definitely don't know this. That's what I was counting on. So he goes castles, I go knight f6, and the only way to seriously fight for an advantage, 2 ways to seriously fight for an advantage here with white are b4 or d5, preventing the knight from going to c6. After d5 there is c6 move for black, or g6, but white is significantly better. After b4 this pawn cannot be taken because there is a significant initiative. The queen has to drop back to b6 or go somewhere there, and white is better, but it's not the end of the world. I was prepared for these lines in case my opponent somehow learned this variation, this theory by heart, even though I doubted it. But I saw, judging by his speed of reaction to this variation, he was unaware of it. And I went knight f6, And he did not choose the most principled variation. And if you are playing online below, let's say, I would say below 2500, if you play online, most of your opponents will never have seen this variation and they will not react in the best way, and you will be equal or better out of the opening with black. So what are the most natural moves here for white? Bishop f4 already loses all the advantage for white. Rook e1, which my opponent played in the game, already loses all advantage for white. I don't know, a3 already is not so good. So yeah, this is crazy. He went rook e1 and I'm equal. And in a couple of moves, I will be better. So what's the idea here? After rook e1 here, or bishop f4, whatever they play, you just go knight c6, castle long, and you enjoy a great position. You attack on the king side, you push the h-pawn. Let me show you what happened in the game. So he went rook e1, knight c6, bishop e3, castles long. Now, e5 is an idea in many variations. This queen is pinned and very awkward. The engine says it's equal, but already the engine prefers black. Move 9. The engine prefers black. Minus 0.1 in the Petzer variation of the Scandinavian. And this is not because my opponent made some blunder. No, because he just played the obvious moves and they were not enough. So this is not such a stupid variation after all, right? So he goes a3, which is logical. He wants to push on the queen side because my king is on the queen side. But I move the queen to the king side, preparing to go knight g4 perhaps, attacking on h2 and on e3. And also just sidestepping his b3 before. He goes knight g3 and I go queen g6. And now my h-pawn is ready to push. To be pushed, and it's very uncomfortable for white. This d4 pawn, you always have to look after it. My opponent here entered into a deep think, and let me remind you that in this tournament we play the so-called new classical or fast classical, 45 minutes per game per opponent, plus a 30-second increment after each move. So the games overall, one game lasts around 2 to 3 hours. So this is not as long as the old classical. I like this format, by the way, very, very exciting, and time trouble happens in every game. So queen f3, clever move. I don't want to take this pawn, of course, because then rook c1 and d5, and he will attack me. He's worse, and I understand that I'm at least not worse over the board. I don't see the evil bar, obviously, but I realized that probably I'm better because I was looking at similar lines with the engine before the game, and I was surprised that white is worse in most of those lines if white doesn't know what to do exactly. So I assume that I don't need to give him counterplay. So of course, after queen f3, I do not take this c2 pawn. And of course, I do not take the d4 pawn, which looks available, but it's not, because there is knight b5 and there is a fork, and the a7 pawn will be lost. And even better, according to the engine, which I didn't consider during the game, is queen e3. And the only move to not lose immediately for black is e5, giving up this pawn and then running somehow, and white is much better. So this pawn on d4 is also poisoned. You do not take such pawns, and you do not take on c2. Instead, I choose the best move according to the engine. I'm already playing on my own. I calculated that this should be better than other options. e6. Just calmly developing. Maybe I'll put my bishop here. I'll push the pawn, and my position is nice. He goes rook c1. I don't know why, because I was not intending to take this pawn, but whatever. I go h5. I continue my plan. And you see how easy the position just plays itself. He goes h3, I push h4, he drops back. And here I'm better, I'm minus 0.4. If I don't rush it, if I just go a6, prophylaxis, or bishop e7. a6, you will see why it's a good idea. So here I decide to not spend too much time, and I decide, you know what, I'll go forward, I'll press him on the clock, he's already down on time here, and I push e5. And I calculate before pushing e5 that if he takes, I take with a knight, only square for the queen is f4, and then I go bishop d6, and there are some nasty x-ray attacks on the queen. So I do this, and once he goes queen f4, I realize that after bishop d6 he has knight b5, which is a little bit annoying, but still there is rook a8, and I realize that, okay, I maybe did not play this in the most precise way, but still my position is fine, and I go bishop d6, and somehow he got scared, and instead of going knight b5, which is, I think, the most logical move and by far the best, he goes queen g5. He could have stayed he could have even retained some slight edge after knight b5, but after queen g5, I'm back to being much better. So of course I can take the queen, but what is better than taking the queen? Knight c4, the move that I chose. I allow him to damage my pawn structure, but in return, I get this monstrous knight on c4, putting pressure on his position. I get the f file, which will be very relevant, you will see it. And I'm definite that my position is better, even though he spoils my pawn structure. And I'm correct to say so. Here he makes a move that I really don't like, but it's hard to advise something to him. For example, if he goes like rook b1, then I'll take on e3, and this pawn on e3 will be forever weak. And if we compare my doubled pawns and his e3 pawn, his e3 pawn is a real weakness, and my doubled pawns are not really weaknesses, because it's only a weakness if you can get to it. That's an important principle that I learned from some chess classical books. If you cannot get to it, it's not a weakness. It's maybe a theoretical weakness, those doubled pawns. But unless white can attack them, which in the near future white will not be able to do, it's not a weakness. So here, rook b1, of course, is not good, but I thought he'll go bishop d4, going for some active counterplay. And if I take this pawn, he has some knight b5 stuff. I think I wouldn't have taken the pawn. But instead he goes knight d1, which is very passive. Yes, this knight defends b2 and e3, but it's not the way you should play chess. And actually, I was considering rook a8 here to put more pressure on the e and d files, and black is just dominating, but I didn't like bishop g5 pinning me. Turns out it's nothing too crazy, but I decided, okay, I'll take his bishop. I'm still a little bit better, but I've lost some of the advantage here. And now knight e4. Knight e4 serves the purpose of restricting this knight from e2. So this knight from e2 really has no good squares, because these squares are controlled. This square is also controlled. And if he goes knight d4, I can, well, I can take on f2, I think, right? Yes, I can take on f2. And then this check will just destroy him. So this knight has problems with finding the life purpose. So he goes rook d1, trying to control this file. And I go bishop c5, piling up the pressure on this diagonal. And here you will see why the f file opening is a good thing for me, even though the pawns have been doubled. He goes knight f4, and I go here rook to e8. I realize that if he takes this pawn, I go here, and I go here, and the f2 pawn will fall after this, and he'll be losing. So this pawn is immune, he cannot touch it. And here he's thinking he has like 5 minutes left, and I have like 15 minutes left, and I try to press him on the clock as well. And I realized it would be funny probably if he went here, because then I would have this beautiful knight f2 idea. And he spends like half a minute and goes knight d3 without realizing that I have set this trap. And I go knight takes f2, which is a nice, very satisfying move to make. So first of all, if he takes with the king, rook f8 comes, and he's just completely pinned everywhere, and he loses the knight. So I will be up a pawn and also attacking, controlling all the files, and my bishop is a monster, clearly winning position. So that's if he takes with the king. Probably from afar he was considering taking the bishop, and it would be fine if after knight takes he could have taken with the knight back. But the problem is that this knight is pinned not only diagonally but vertically as well. So after this, if he takes the knight, rook takes e1 seals the deal. And if he takes here, I'll take the knight and be up material. So you will see the power of pins. This is very, very, very beautiful geometry of the chessboard. So he has to take with the knight, but it's still losing. I take with the bishop. Now you will see again, I'm still pinning him, and I will be pinning him for the rest of this game. So this is some BDSM stuff with bondage. So rook f8, piling more pressure. Rook f1, now bishop b6, just sidestepping. And he can trade these rooks, but he cannot escape the pin, because if he's still pinned, so if he tries to go like this to try and go knight d3 next move, I pin him vertically again, and he will have to go king g1 back and be pinned again forever. So he cannot trade the rooks because of this. Well, he can, but he will still be winning. So he goes rook d2, waiting, but now I go rook f5, and now I want to put 2 rooks on the f file to never ever allow him any chance of unpinning. He goes rook d1, I double my rooks, and he has to drop back. And this is a pathetic position for white. Obviously, here I don't rush it, I just go a5, and my plan is very simple. He can do nothing, while I can improve my position to later on trade everything on f2 and go into a pawn endgame where not only will I be up a pawn, but my king will be somewhere here probably, and the pawns will be traded, and I will be able to let me show this on the board. I will be able to have a passed pawn on the queen side and win easily. So he goes before, we trade, I go bishop e3, to tickle his rook. Once it goes back, I can go here and then go c5, which is my plan. Here, c5. And the idea is if he takes, I just take, and I've drawn some arrows to show you what I do. He cannot do anything about this. So I just march my king, I push the pawn, I march my king further. He's still pinned, he cannot do anything. His rooks have to be glued, and the king they all have to be glued to the knight. So I advance my king, I advance my pawn, I advance my king here. Then I take everything on f2. We exchange everything. There will be only kings left on the board, and my king will take his pawn, and the b pawn will promote. So that's the plan, and he cannot stop it. So after c5, he does not take, he realizes this, he goes c3 out of desperation, but I just take, and he flex in this position, but it's hopeless. After this, he can take the pawn, but then I'll just march the king here and then trade everything on f2 and take the c5 pawn and win the pawn endgame. So this was a clinical finish, I think. I played at something like 90% accuracy. There were just a couple inaccuracies where after the opening in the middle game, I showed you I could have played better, but still overall I'm pleased with the result. And obviously the Petzer variation is something that you probably could add to your repertoire, especially online. Obviously this is not for playing all the time. People will start preparing for you and they will start destroying you if you play it all the time. But sometimes just for one game, or for rapid and blitz, it's a very, very good weapon, as I've probably demonstrated to you. And credit goes to Pavel Stelmashenko, candidate master from Ukraine, who actually popularized this stuff, and he was the second, and he still is, the second to Alexander Shimanov, the grandmaster who played this and who defeated lots of top guys with it. So yeah, now we take a look at the second game, where I play against Leonid Nozdrachov, an international master from Russia. He's rated around 2200, something like that. He dropped a little bit of rating, but he's a very dangerous opponent. For example, in classical chess, he has defeated Danil Dubov and many other top players, grandmasters, masters. And I'm playing with white pieces. I already played him once. It was a very, very intense battle. There was this, we had a drawn endgame, but I missed it. I missed the draw at the end and I lost. So this time I wanted to get my revenge, of course. And I play the same system that I already was telling you about. Again, another one of those systems popularized by Shimanov and invented actually by Stelmashenko, but that very same genius Ukrainian guy. Kudos to him. So the idea, the system is queen d3, and I was already telling you guys about this system in the previous video. Shimanov used it to beat Magnus Carlsen in the rapid game. So after this, it gained popularity. And there are various plans here for black: g6, d6, e6, a6, or the combination thereof. But my opponent goes for the e6 plan, and this is some kind of theory in this line. There are various ways to play here with black, but the most popular are d5 or queen a5. And I knew the theory in both of them. But my opponent surprised me. He went a6, which is not the best move. It is maybe the fourth or the fifth recommendation of the engine. But I was surprised and I didn't know what to do with it. And I was considering probably f3, because this pawn needs protection in many of those lines. But I was calculating d5, which is the most principled response. Takes, and queen b6, which is an idea in similar lines. And I really didn't like my position. So black has sacrificed a pawn, but bishop e6 is coming next to rook d8, rook c8, and I'm attacked, and my pieces are a little bit clumsy. And the engine says actually black has full compensation. It's equal, even though white is up a pawn. And it's equal only if white finds the most precise move, like queen e4 or a3, two moves that hold equality. Other moves lead to a much worse position for white. So yeah, I evaluated this correctly. So f3, I did not want to do this. Actually, in like one move ago, there is also this line with d5. And there is a similar line where black also, there is queen f6 and there is queen b6. But here, bishop e3 is possible, which is a difference. Now, if the pawn is on f3, bishop e3 would not be possible already. So that's the difference. So after a6, f3 I didn't like, and I didn't know what else to do. So h4 is the move suggested by the engine, and after d5, just bishop g5. But this is some computer stuff, not obvious, not taken on d5. And I was struggling and I did not want to spend too much time, and I decided, okay, I'll trade those bishops, and my queen will be like an annoying piece in enemy's territory, preventing d5, which is a plan in similar variations. And I thought it cannot be a mistake to do this. But still, it's not the most precise way to play. Now it's around equal. He goes b5. He wants to put the bishop on b7. For the time being, maybe it's not not really possible, because I can go e5, and this knight will no longer protect the d7 pawn, which will be attacked twice once the bishop goes to b7. So, but in future he wants to go bishop b7. Also, he wants to push b4, a5, a4, attack me on the queen side. And I'm a little bit not fast enough on the king side, so I have to do something fast. So I go knight d4, which is the top engine move here. I want to trade these knights because the knight was in the way of my bishop. He doesn't want to trade, he draws back, but now I go knight b3, and now this knight is controlling the a5 square, which is where the queen usually goes in such positions. Also, the queen cannot go to b6 or c7, so his queen is kind of not seeing some bright future for it. So he goes knight d8, trying to kick me back. I drop back, and he goes b4, and I go knight a4. Usually knight a4, it looks a bit awkward, but it's a good place for the knight in such positions, because the pawn cannot just jump over the knight, and then the knight is stopping the pawn advance. And unless the knight can be somehow disturbed by, let's say, bishop d7, which is not possible here, then the knight on a4 is a good piece, and actually the engine agrees. So a5, he tries pushing again, and I go queen e3. My idea is to infiltrate on the dark squares like this. The engine says bishop b5 first was better. I was considering this move, but I didn't like d5. The engine says it's around equal, a little bit more precise to play bishop b5, but queen e3 is also fine. With those ideas that I highlighted with arrows. He goes d5 nonetheless, and I jump in with the queen b6. So my idea is quite straightforward. If he trades the queens, he'll lose one of those pawns, either this one or this one, a5 or d5. For example, if he goes rook b8, I take, and I take on a5, and I'm up a pawn. His rook is no longer on the a file, no longer defending this pawn. If in this position he doesn't go rook b8, he wants to stay in touch with this pawn, he goes here, for example, then I'll take on this here and take d5, and the d5 pawn will fall. And I'm just winning in this endgame, up a pawn, healthy pawn. So that's why he cannot take my queen. But I'm threatening to take his queen. He has to do something. He goes knight d6. Now, if I take his queen, he takes with the rook. Actually, that was the best move in the position, but I didn't like something. By the way, this move is not good. I realized it, and the engine agrees that yes, even though trading the knight for the bishop is good in some variations, in most situations, knights are less strong than bishops, but not in this one. And actually, even though this pawn looks hanging, but this pawn will die, and yeah, it's not a good position. So, but I was not obliged to go knight b6 in this position. I can go, I can do many other things that retain equality. So this I could have done, but I thought that I am galloping with my horses in a very effective way, and here is the part in the game where my ego plays an important role. Let me tell you something about chess psychology. So I calculated a variation. Knight here, and if he takes the queen, I take, and if he goes rook b8, I can go here, forking the rooks. If he takes, I take, and if he takes on e4, I take on f8, he takes here, and I drop back to d7 here. And his rook on b8 is hanging now, and I'm winning. So let me show you this on the board. Takes, knight here, takes, 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 takes. His rook is hanging. My both rooks are hanging, but the problem is that I'm up a piece. The problem for him. And if rook d8, bishop b5. Defends everything, and at the end of the day, when the dust settles, white is winning. White is up a piece. So the whole variation that I should just show you, I calculated at this point. I was very proud of myself. Like before going knight c5, I calculated this. Then this happened. He went rook b8, and I started double checking everything. And I realized that he's not obliged to go for this. He can go takes, knight e4, and after knight takes, he can just take my knight. And he's down in exchange, but he will take this pawn. I cannot protect it. And also this will be a threat on both rooks. So I have to go rook e1, knight takes, rook g1. And at the end of the day, look at those pawns that he has in the center. He has a knight and two pawns, central pawns in the center for my rook. And I realized at this point, I think at this point, when he went rook b8, I realized that this position will happen and he will have a knight and two pawns for rook. And probably it's more convenient to play with black than with white, I thought. I did not see the evil bar, obviously. I was not 100% sure, but I decided, okay, probably I went wrong somehow. And I was looking for other ways to play in this position. If I take here, he takes here, and my knight will be hanging, and then I'll lose a pawn, so that's not good. I thought, what if I drop back, but then he takes this pawn, and he'll be up a pawn. Turns out I should have calculated one move further. Knight c5 regains this pawn, because if f5, then probably bishop c4, and I'm good. So black is still better, but this is what I should have gone for. But my ego probably involved, or the cognitive fallacy. It's called how is it called? When you invested some effort in something and you don't want to give it up. Okay, I will look it up and write it in the comments. What's the name of this cognitive fallacy? When you've invested and you don't want to just say, okay, I was wrong. Let me rethink this whole thing, and everything that I considered was bullshit. I need now to take a step back and calculate other lines. Somehow my ego got in the way, and that's the only explanation, because of course I was capable of calculating the line with knight a4 takes here and knight c5. It's a much easier line to calculate than the previous line I showed you, and I would be like not equal but close to equality. Instead, I went for this exchange stuff. Here I realized that if I take, he will take, he will not take, he'll take here. And I realized, okay, I don't have to rush with it because both rooks for him are hanging, so I can wait with my knight. First I go rook e1, he takes, I go rook g1, and he goes rook c8, and now we trade. So this is the position. And the longer I looked at this position with my clock ticking, the more I was thinking I'm a complete bozo, and this endgame is not pleasant. And the engine actually says it's like winning for black already, because the pawns are so dangerous. But I'm trying to do my best. I go g4, preventing the knight jump to f5. He goes g5. He wants to take the f4 outpost then. I go king d2. He goes knight g6. And I go bishop d3. My idea is that I need to open some lines. For example, if he takes, I'll take like this. And my rooks, I drew some arrows here. My rooks will occupy the open file, and maybe I'll even win some material, and my a-pawn will march. And that's the idea in such a position. Because rooks belong on open files. In this position, there are no open files. All files are either completely closed or semi-open. An open file is a file where there is no pawn at all. Not my pawn, not my opponent's pawn. All those files here are like, they have at least one pawn on them. So that's why I'm happy to trade the bishop for the knight here. He goes knight h3, attacking my rook. I go rook g3. He goes here. And actually, with this maneuver, he has squandered some of his advantage. Because now I trade the bishop for the knight. And I go c3. And if he takes, finally, I will get some open lines. And I will get some counterplay. Already the engine says that it's in between like a draw and a loss, maybe a draw with perfect play for white. He goes king e7, I take, and I go a3. So I want to form a passed pawn. If he takes, my rook will slide to the queen side and start harassing the king, and also my pawn will march. In ideal universe, I will be playing, well, not for a win, but at least I will be pressing him and not just waiting for him to kill me. So he goes d4, a very nice move, by the way. So the idea is to push d3 and rook c2, and he just ignores his pawn on b4. And here I go rook e4, which is an inaccuracy. Turns out I had here a chance to take this pawn and to just give up the rook for the knight and a pawn and play this endgame. I drew some arrows for you guys here. I think that it's closer to a losing endgame than to a winning one, than to a drawing one for me, because his pawns are so compact and they will march. But still, it was an opportunity for me to try something like this. Instead, I went rook e4. If he goes d3 now, I'll take this pawn and I will have good chances for draw. But instead, he takes my pawn here. Now, if I take here, he'll take on b2 and I'll be busted. So I take with the rook to at least have this file for the rook. And he goes d3. And actually, again, here I have some chances if I find h4. But I'm in time trouble and I forget about this resource. So the idea is that he cannot take because his knight will be hanging. And if he goes rook c2 check, I just drop back, and this pawn is like not well protected. After this, for example, I can even, you know what I can do? I can take on d3 and then take here. And I will be already winning if he does this. But of course, he can take on b2 instead. And he'll still be playing for a win because he has some dangerous pawns. But white has good drawing chances. I could have gone for this. But instead, I completely forgot about the h-pawn and h-file. I was too concentrated on his threat of rook c2. So I went rook c3 in time trouble, and he went rook h8, going after this pawn on the other side of the board. I completely forgotten. I need to stay like focused on the full board's vision. And I didn't do this in this game. And unfortunately, this is completely hopeless for me. I went b4, he took, he pushed f5. Now, if I take, he takes, and he has 1, 2, 3, 4 connected passed pawns that are all marching, and obviously this is horrible for me. So instead of taking, I went rook d4, and at least now he has the tripled pawns, which are not as effective for advancing as three connected passed pawns, but he has a bunch of pawns and it's enough for a win here. And I realized that my b pawn is not going anywhere. And he will just play g3, g2, g1 queen, and I can do nothing. So I tried desperately to do something here, but he's just losing. He's threatening g1 queen and then rook b1 check, taking my rook. So I go here and he goes here. And next he'll check me on f1 and queen, and I resign this game. Unfortunately, I spoiled all my efforts. I could have stayed in the game at some point. So in the end game, I did not play so badly. But the problem was my ego. The problem was my ego and this point of the game. Because in the end game, it was tough. I cannot blame myself too much. But at this point of the game, I should have realized that I made a mistake after rook b8 and not go for this. And instead go back. Admit that you've been wrong. I need to work on my chess psychology to be able to do that. Thank you for watching this recap and see you in the next one. Bye bye.